Welcome back, bassists. In this video, we're going to learn how to hold our instrument both standing and sitting, and we're also going to learn the names of our strings, and we're going to learn pizzicato position as well as some left-hand fingers to change notes of these open strings. So in the last video, we learned how to get our instrument in and out of the case. So at this point, you should have your instrument out of the case and your end pin adjusted to the height that suits your own height. So make sure that the nut is somewhere between your hairline and your eyebrows. As you can see on my instrument, I have my bow in what's called a bow quiver. Your instrument may or may not have this. Now, if you don't have this, we're not going to be using the bow for this video, so you can put it someplace safe. Now that we have our instrument out of the case and the end pin extended to the proper length, let's learn how to hold the instrument in the standing position. There are a couple points of contact that the instrument has with your body that allow it to stay propped up while you're playing. We're going to talk about the back corner of the upper bout. This part is going to rest against our waist. The second point of contact we're going to have is our thumb on the left hand on the back of the neck. And the third point of contact is going to be our right hand, either in our pizzicato position or when we play with our bow. So getting ourselves set up to hold the instrument, we want to first get our feet shoulder width apart. So you can kind of imagine that. Another good way is to just do a little hop and fall where your legs would naturally, and that puts your feet about shoulder width apart. Now what we're going to do, if you have your bass going straight forward, you want to turn to maybe about 10 o'clock. Then you want to turn your bass to about 2 o'clock. So we have this diagonal going on here. Now what you're going to do is have the instrument leaning back into you, having that back of the top bout leaning against your waist. So about where your waistline is. If you're wearing a belt, that's where the instrument would rest against you. So with the instrument leaning against your waist, now let's talk about our left hand. So our left hand is going to go up, and what we want to do is pretend that we're holding a can of soda. So you have this nice C curved shape with your hand. On the back of the neck, our thumb pad is going to just rest right on the back of the neck. Now that we have those 2 points of contact, let's check our balance. So a properly balanced bass will float if you take your hand off and just for a second float and then fall backwards. Okay, not fast. If it's falling backwards very fast, then you're leaning too far back. If you have it here also leaning and it falls forward very fastly, you're leaning too far forward. So find that point where you have a really nice balanced point. You shouldn't feel, when you're holding it in this position, any pressure on the back of your thumb. You also shouldn't be feeling any pressure on the tips of your fingers. So just experiment with that. Have a safety hand there available just in case it moves too fast. But it should just hover for a split second and then fall backwards. So let's talk about seating position. So if you want to use a stool, we want to make sure that we have a very high stool, just slightly below waist. So when you sit down, you don't want to changing your height very much. I'm going to set my stool just slightly where I was standing. And then all the same rules apply. Make sure your feet are shoulder width apart. Take a seat in your chair. And the biggest difference is that our foot is going to sit on the lowest rung of our stool. So in the seated position, then just let the instrument lean into you. Again, the back of the upper bout is going to lean against your waist. The left thumb is going to be behind the neck. A third point of contact that you have when you're sitting is that the back of the instrument is going to rest against your thigh, the inside of your knee here. For the remainder of this video, I'm going to model pizzicato and left hand fingers in the standing position. But it really is all exactly the same if you're sitting in your stool. Let's talk about our strings. So we have 4 strings on our bass. They go from the highest string, which we call string number 1, all the way down to our lowest string, which is the thickest, string number 4. So we have string 1, 2, 3, and 4. These strings also have letter names. Starting from string number 1, this is G. Going down to string number 2, we have D. Continuing down, we have string number 3, which is A. And then our lowest, which is string 4, is the note E. To play our strings, we use 2 techniques. We have pizzicato, which means to pluck the strings, and arco, meaning to bow the strings. In this video, we're just going to focus on pizzicato. For pizzicato, there are 2 main styles of pizzicato. The first one is sometimes referred to as jazz pizz, and the second one is referred to as classical pizz. Both jazz pizzicato and classical pizzicato utilize the same setup, but just how much of our finger we use to make contact with the string makes the difference. So we're going to start with jazz pizzicato. For jazz pizzicato, we're going to use about half of our index finger. So if you look at your index finger, you have 1, 2, 3 segments. The tip of the finger, the middle segment, and then the lower segment. The top and the middle segments are what's going to make contact with our string in jazz pizzicato. So what we want to do is bend right before that third segment like this, and that side of our finger is going to make contact with the string. So let's get ourselves set up for a jazz pizzicato. Let's make an L with our hand like this, or with our thumb and our pointer finger, and we're going to let the pad of our thumb rest against the side of the fingerboard about 4 or 5 inches from the end of the fingerboard. We're going to arch over and let those 2 segments rest against the G string, string number 1. Now in order to make it sound, what we need to do is pull it sideways. We don't want to pull away from us or into the instrument. We want to pull sideways. So I'm going to pull to my right. Now I can hook the string like this, and then I just let it go. And it makes a really wonderful thud vibration there. The benefit of a jazz pizzicato is it's very loud and heavy. Let's practice that again. So again, the top 2 segments of our index finger making contact with the G string. We're pulling to the side and then letting it go. I want to point out that my elbow isn't drooping. I have my wrist relatively straight, so my elbow height is where you can see it now. Now I'm going to move to the D string, down 1 string. I want you to notice my elbow. I drop it just a little bit to keep that line straight with my wrist. Same thing applies with this D string. Now on this time, I want you to notice, or try to do this, I want your index finger, after it plucks the D string, to rest on the neighboring string. Sort of like a landing pad. So as we pull against the D string, I'm going to let it go and then land on the A string. Let's do the same with the A string. Same rules apply. I drop my elbow just a little bit to keep my wrist straight. I'm going to make contact with the A string with the top 2 segments of my index finger, pluck, and then land against the E string. Here it is, A string. Let's pluck on my cue. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last but not least is the E string. You're going to pluck it exactly the same, but the only difference is there isn't a string next to it to land on. So we're just going to let our finger fall into our palm. On my cue, pluck E string. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now for classical pizzicato, what we're going to do is change the angle of our hand ever so slightly, so we're just plucking with the tip of our finger. Just the pad of our finger, and it makes a sound like this. It's a little lighter than our jazz pizzicato, which sounded like this. Oftentimes, if you want a more delicate sound, or you're playing in a lower dynamic, you want to have this light sound. Same rules apply. You make the same shape, rest your thumb against the side of the fingerboard, arch over, make sure that you're changing string heights with your elbow, keeping that wrist straight. Let's practice a little pizzicato on each string in classical pizzicato. So starting with G on my cue. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your index finger should be resting against the D string at this point. Let's pluck D string on my cue. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next string, A string. 1, 2, 3, 4. Last, E string. 1, 2, 3, 4. In the next video, we're going to focus on our left hand, and we're going to learn to put our fingers on the fingerboard to create new notes. See you next time!